people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Baum Gardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
I'm trying to let these hands go. I don't care who it is. I just want to fight, y'all. It's been too long. I've been out the ring since July. It's just been too long. So anyways, like I said, Amanda Serrano, Chantel Cameron, Katie Taylor, a super fight with Clarissa. I think that'd just be big. Listen, we're both from Michigan. Why not run that back at Little Caesars Arena? Just like back in Detroit, but make it big. I feel like Detroit has that opportunity again, and I feel like it'd be great to have it in Detroit. And if that doesn't happen, cool, put it somewhere else. But the bottom line is, y'all, I'm a competitor. I've been boxing since the age of 8. I've been in this game for some 20-some years now. Okay? I don't back down from no smoke, from nobody. Y'all know that I will fight anybody. So I don't want to hear, oh, she don't want to. No, I want all the smoke.
That is Alicia Baumgartner expressing her interest in what can only be described as mega fights, very big fights, that might leave her so inclined to leave the super featherweight division, where she doesn't really have all that much left to do. But how many of these aforementioned fights with these fighters are actually realistic? She mentioned Katie Taylor. She mentioned Chantel Cameron. For the time being, the immediate future, the both of them are tied up with each other. Immediately after Katie's second fight with Chantel, she expressed her openness to doing a third. Chantel Cameron, very recently, she said the same. She's open to a trilogy, so that rules the both of them out.
And what about Amanda Serrano?
After Amanda's fight with Katie Taylor, when she moved back down to featherweight and started on her undisputed campaign, she said it then, that she's not going to be moving up and down in weight anymore, and that the only fight that could get her to move back up in weight would have to be the Taylor fight. But outside of that, she's not going to be fluctuating in weight anymore. Her real weight, her ideal weight, is featherweight, and that's where she plans on staying, thus making a fight between Amanda and Alicia could be very expensive for Matchroom.
Amanda's been making very good fight purses, headlining her own shows. She's got lots of sponsors. She's doing commercials. She's getting money. Very, very good money. So much so that it might actually be very expensive to get her in the ring with Alicia Baumgartner, because Amanda doesn't need them.
The fight between Amanda and Alicia is the biggest fight that you could hope to make anywhere at or around these weights, 126 and 130. Thus, if you want to make a super fight, you have to pay super prices, super fight purses.
Super fight, super purse. That's how it goes.
And what about Alicia's belts? And what about the anti-doping fiasco? The alphabet organizations, all 4 of them, the sanctioning bodies, they've yet to reach adjudication with Alicia Baumgartner's ongoing investigation into her adverse finding. We don't know that all 4 of them aren't going to strip her. We don't know that they are.
Adjudication has yet to be reached by way of all 4 of the sanctioning bodies Alicia has held belts with. We don't know that she doesn't hold those belts anymore. We don't know that she does. That requires reconciliation as well. She mentioned Clarissa Shields.
A fight between her and Clarissa at any weight would be farcical. Alicia Baumgartner is not a big woman. She's not big at all, whereas Clarissa, she's campaigned as high as 168. That's where she started out her career. Thus, to do anything between them, you'd have to meet in the middle somewhere. I don't know, perhaps welterweight, an idea that Alicia Baumgartner courted by way of her social media. She made that suggestion publicly.
It's understood that the ladies fluctuate up and down in weight more than the guys do, but even among the ladies, there are limits, and this would be a bit farcical for Clarissa to take on Alicia.
Nevertheless, it was Alicia herself that pitched that idea, she made that suggestion, and I expect that in the coming year, Alicia Gardner will be back. I don't expect that this whole anti-doping fiasco thing, whatever's going on, I don't imagine it's going to keep her out of the ring much longer, that she will be back in the coming year, but the issue is there's not much reason to stay at super featherweight. She's already become an undisputed champion there.
And unless it's for an Amanda Serrano fight, there's not much reason to stay there.
What seems realistic? If Katie Taylor is running it back with Chantel Cameron at 140 pounds, it's conceivable that at least one or some of the belts that Katie holds at 135 may go vacant in the coming year. So should Alicia Gardner decide she doesn't want to squeeze down to 130 anymore, in that situation, she can move up to 135 and see about becoming a two-division champion. That's if Katie is all tied up with Chantel again, and that's if Katie's belts at 135, at least one or some of them, end up going vacant in 2024.
That's realistic. And that would give Alicia Gardner something to do in the absence of a super fight, a mega fight.
She can do that while she waits. Now, anyone critical of Alicia Gardner's anti-doping fiasco having an ethical dilemma as to whether or not she should be allowed to return, well, Tyson Fury was allowed to return. Canelo Alvarez was allowed to return. Jarrell Miller, after two separate situations, was allowed to return. So Alicia's case should be no different.
Alicia should be allowed to return because she's capable, charismatic, and because she's fucking hot.
In men's super lightweight and welterweight news, former unified welterweight champion Keith Thurman spoke on Devin Haney defeating Regis Prograis, saying, Rolly Romero would have been way more deadly and dangerous. He's a bigger threat. Keith Thurman
It's a joke.
Today's Keith Thurman is not to be taken seriously. The idea that he would diminish Regis Prograis as a fighter so that he can in effect diminish Devin Haney's victory over him to prop up Rolly Romero, it's tell them age from PBC fighters and the PBC to diminish other fighters for doing what they're not doing. What Rolly
Romero may hold the title at 140 pounds, but he didn't actually beat a champion to be a champion like Devin did. No, Rolly needed a gift over an old man, a gift stoppage. He needed a gift over Jackson Marinez at 135, a gift stoppage over Ishmael Barroso at 140, and his claim to fame isn't even a fight that he won, someone that he beat. It's getting knocked out by Javante. That's why everybody knows him.
And this is PBC brand boxing. Most of the time, this is what their content and what they shell out and what their fighters do, what their fighters say. This is what you get from them most of the time. Keith Thurman seriously expects me and you to look at Rolly Romero as a bigger threat to Devin than Regis Prograis.
Devin plans on going to 147 pounds. Among the names he mentioned that he would be interested in fighting, Keith Thurman, the former unified champion, the one saying all this dumb shit, he was mentioned. And instead of talking about how Rolly is a bigger threat than Regis, who Devin just fought, why don't you threaten Devin? That is, why don't you fight him?
Keith Thurman and what remains of his career, that's a joke that isn't funny. And the sooner you get people like this, and Rolly, the sooner you get them out of the American boxing scene, the better. Because the American boxing scene doesn't need them. What it needs are fighters, not
Not a used car salesman in Keith Thurman, and not a special needs kid in Rolly Romero. American boxing doesn't need these people.
Only in the American boxing scene here today do you see these kinds of shenanigans and this brand of tomfoolery, these big talkers that'll say anything but let's fight.
You wonder why boxing's hairline is receding in America.
It's because you got clowns like this running around. Instead of talking about Rolly Romero and what a threat he is or isn't to Devin Haney, you want us to believe that Rolly is actually a better boxer and a bigger threat than Regis Prograis. Instead of wasting our time with that stuff, why don't you just welcome Devin to the welterweight division and stop talking?
Are you here to talk or are you here to fight?
Keith Thurman has developed a very bad habit over the years of shading fighters that are doing more than he is at the time. I remember when Terrence Crawford moved up to his third division, his third weight class, and became a champion there, Keith Thurman's reaction was to diminish him, diminish Jeff Horn by saying that Jeff is barely a champion. And more recently, he didn't want to give Terrence credit for his victory over Errol either. And now he doesn't want to give Devin credit for his victory over Regis. This is what he does.
He was shading Terrence Crawford. Now he's shading Devin Haney. He'll say anything except, let's fight.
It's how far from grace he's fallen that a woman in Clarissa Shields thinks that she can beat Keith Thurman because he's a joke that just isn't funny. And by all rights, he's a quasi-retired fighter that should fully retire and just go away.
You don't see her calling out Jaron Ennis or Conor Ben or one of those guys. No, she's calling out Keith because to everybody, Keith Thurman is low-hanging fruit.
And if you don't like people talking about you in that way or viewing you in that lens, that spectrum, there's one way you can fix it. You can fight. You can fight for respect. But Keith Thurman is one of these boxers that wants to do everything but box. One of these fighters that wants to do everything but fight.
The burger that don't burger.
Who needs him? He's likely upset that Devin Haney named him as a person of interest for what is to be his welterweight campaign, and it is fitting because Keith Thurman is active. In a manner of speaking, he hasn't retired, even though he hasn't fought in a while. Better still, he is a former champion and one of the familiar faces at the weight, so it's only natural that a young unbeaten up-and-comer like Devin Haney would want to fight him. And instead of obliging Devin...
You'd rather be catty. You'd rather diminish his victory over Regis Prograis, prop up somebody else that isn't going to fight Devin either.
May as well be hiding behind Rolly Romero. Why are you talking about him when Devin said he wants to fight you? Men's super middleweight news. Some recent comments from reigning WBC interim champion David Benavidez on his interest in a fight against WBA regular champion David Morrell. I'm not trying to be the person talking crap about everybody, but David Morrell is a clown. He has 9 fights and thinks everybody is scared of him. If there's no other fight, then I'll definitely make a fight with David Morrell. But we're trying to make this fight with Charlo. Trying to make it happen with Canelo Alvarez.
Trying to make a fight with Charlo.
And with Canelo. A Canelo Alvarez fight is the one that everyone is waiting for. The problem with that is that's not going to happen in May. That looks to be happening in September, sometime around there. So for the time being, who does David Benavidez plan on fighting? And it looks like he plans on fighting Charlo, but is that a fight that Charlo is receptive to? Is that a fight that he's willing to have, given that he was just in the ring with David's brother, Jose, who used to campaign as a welterweight, and Jamal couldn't knock him out. He couldn't stop him. Terrence Crawford stopped him.
Jamal couldn't.
That's how far Charlo has fallen from grace. He's reached the point to where he can't stop the likes of a Jose Benavidez. So what makes him a person of interest for David Benavidez?
More than David Morrell. David Morrell, who said, these bitches are fans of talking behind the scenes and face to face. They are little girls.
My thoughts. David Morrell will be in action this weekend as part of Showtime Boxing's swan song in the sport of boxing. David Morrell will be opposite the ring at Becco, and if he takes care of business and stays an unbeaten fighter, I would rather see David Morrell versus David Benavidez than Charlo versus David Benavidez. I don't see the point in putting Charlo in the ring with David.
It's a safe fight for David.
Seems like for the last 2 years he's been feasting on middleweights, what are primarily former middleweight champions. David Lemieux last year, Demetrius Andre this one, and it looks like he wants to kick off next year fighting another middleweight in Charlo, who's done absolutely nothing of note as a super middleweight. Moreover, Charlo's name is attached to a potential Caleb Plant fight.
I feel like if Jamal has to choose between fighting David or fighting Caleb, he'd rather fight Caleb. Caleb slapped the taste out of his mouth. He's got to get his lick back.
If he has to choose, I feel like David Benavidez is stuck between a rock and a hard place, to where he's not crazy about fighting David Morrell, but he's running out of options when you consider that David Benavidez's last 2 fights have been billed as box office fights, pay-per-views, and it looks like he wants to keep fighting on pay-per-view moving forward, no matter how abysmal the numbers are, because neither of those 2 fights sold very much. Better still, he insists on doing that, and
he has to do something. He has to fight someone while he waits for Canelo. He wants that someone to be Benavidez-Charlo. But what if it isn't? What if Jamal ends up fighting someone else? In previous instances, he's mentioned Jamal. He's mentioned Jaime Munguia, but Jaime's busy. Jaime's fighting John Ryder early next year. And there are rumors that he may end up fighting Canelo on Cinco de Mayo. That rules them out. So who does he fight while he waits? What does he do? Does he just sit out, waiting for the phone to ring, sit out most of next year, waiting for Canelo to pick him, to give him a call? Given David's size and his age and the amount of time he's already spent at super middleweight, inactivity would not be a good idea. He has to fight someone, but who? Fight David Morrell. He's on your side of the street. If he takes care of business this weekend, that does make for a great fight. David Morrell versus David Benavidez. David needs a decent enough opponent who can put up a decent enough fight, a decent enough angle that you can build the fight as a pay-per-view, because it looks like moving forward he wants to box exclusively on pay-per-view. That's where his last two fights have been. Well, maybe you can do that with David Morrell. Maybe. If he doesn't, I don't know what he's gonna do. I don't know who he's gonna fight, if he's gonna fight. See, if David Benavidez doesn't fight David Morrell, it's not actually the end of the world for David Morrell, because he's only got 9 fights, and there are plenty of people around that he can fight at only 9-0 or 10-0 if he takes care of business this weekend. His fights aren't that expensive to put on anyway. But David Benavidez, who's he gonna fight? For David Morrell, it's easier to make fights for David Morrell because he's not boxing on pay-per-view, and he's only 9-0, 10-0 if he takes care of business this weekend, 10-0 if he takes care of business anyway. Who's the average guy fighting at 10-0? So he's still within his right to face journeymen and gatekeepers for another year. Guys like Coceres, guys like Gongora, he can still keep fighting guys like that, because who's the average fighter fighting at 10-0 anyway? And those are inexpensive fights to make. But for David Benavidez, what is David Benavidez gonna do if Jamal is busy and he's still not interested in Morrell? Who's he gonna fight? He looked every bit a monster opposite the ring, Demetrius Andrade, who he beat into submission and forced him to retire on his stool. Though if he wants to keep the momentum going and his name ascending, keep building on that buzz, he's got to be active. He has to keep fighting, and it's getting more and more difficult to find fights for him while he waits for Canelo to give him a call. So like I said, David Benavidez is stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't imagine, after campaigning at that weight for all these years, that weight is getting any easier for David to make. But if you tack on potential inactivity, a long stretch from one fight to the next, that actually makes it a lot harder. Though if you're making the weight consistently because you're active and you're fighting, that makes it easier. So he has to fight. He can't afford to sit on the couch waiting for the phone to ring, ballooning and wait. It's going to be interesting to see how David Benavidez, his team, and the people at the PBC work this out, because it's not a secret that David wants that Canelo Alvarez fight, and he may yet get it in September, but it doesn't favor him at all to go into that fight if he doesn't fight between now and then.